The world is going through changes happening at a speed that we have never seen before. This is leading to disruption, chaos, panic, fear, hysteria, and a turbulent economy and marketplace. How do you protect your wealth in a turbulent world? How do you invest for cash flow in alternative assets to escape the rat race in times of uncertainty? How do you decentralize yourself, family, your community, your business, and your investments to become sovereign and escape the matrix? If you are looking for strategies, tactics, and techniques to escape the rat race and matrix, you are in the right place. My name is MC Lobsher, and this is Cashflow Ninja. This is Cashflow Ninja. I'm MC Lobsher. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode and spending your most valuable resource, your time, once again with me. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com, cashflowninja.com, podcasts, books, reports, webinars, and much, much more. And don't forget to sign up for the Wealth Dojo. That is the #1 newsletter in the alternative wealth strategy and alternative asset investing space. You can subscribe to that newsletter, which goes out weekly, at cashflowninja.com/subscribe. I've got a fantastic show for you today. I'm joined by Michael Cobb from ECI Development. Michael, it's great to see you.
Well, nice to be back. It's always a fun conversation with you. So I've been looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Now, this conversation that we're going to have couldn't have come at a more timely in a more timely manner, because I've been getting so many questions about a plan B and buying property overseas. There's a ton of people that have reached out to us. And when I saw your book, How to Buy Your Home Overseas and Get It Right the First Time, yep, I looked at that and I'm like, I gotta talk to Michael again, because there's so many people talking about it. Michael, for our listeners and our viewers that's not familiar with you and what you do, before we jump into this exciting topic of your latest book, can you please give a little bit of your background and journey?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I started working in Belize 31 years ago now. Started a little mortgage company because there was no mortgage money, right? If you went to Belize to buy a property or a condo or a home or something like that, no bank in the US or Canada would lend you the money, and no bank in Belize would lend the money either. And so you had this big hole in the marketplace with North American buyers that wanted financing, needed financing, and they couldn't get it. So we started a little mortgage company, ran that for about 10 years from 1993 to 2003, and then turned that actually into a bank. And so we hired professional bankers to come and operate the bank, but I'm still on the board and do a lot with their credit committee, things like that. But along the way, what was really interesting, MC, was we started, because I was the boots on the ground guy. I was the guy that had to go inspect the collateral. And what I saw was that if you were spending this back in the 90s, right? If you were spending $400,000 or $500,000 and up, like, you were actually getting a really nice product. But if you were spending, $75,000, $80,000, $100,000, $150,000, you were kind of getting stuff that, while it might be built well, like the actual bones of the product were built well, like it was just off. Like, every door handle is at a different height. The countertops are too high or too low. The light in the bathroom is back here, not over top. I remember one example, and this is 90s, early 90s. So, no camera. Everyone has a camera now, right?
Right.
Back then, if you had one, right? I didn't. I remember walking into this house. It was a condo. And there was one outlet on one wall of the living room, and they'd plugged in 2 outlet strips with extension cords to outlet strips to extension cords, like to get power the whole way around this room. And I just started, my business partner and I, we would talk about this as we were doing mortgages and stuff like that. We're like, you know what? Like, we could fix all of these problems for free, or maybe $100. So basically, for the same money, we could deliver product that would be a North American standard and what they expected. And that's really our entree into the development business. We started our development company in Belize 28 years ago. And today we work in Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and we have projects in Honduras and El Salvador as well.
So this is 30 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
being boots on the ground and buying property overseas. And it's
Yep.
just, when you said that, it's interesting. Growing up in South Africa and
Yeah.
having traveled throughout Africa during my life, it's a completely different ball game. And Latin America and all the other developing countries, very, very similar. I love the fact, though, this is kind of like a little bit off topic, but I love the fact that the brick houses, right? Where in
Yeah.
North America, it's like just wood and drywall. But
Right.
then you've got all the other issues that go along with it, and it's not kind of like you said, it's all over the place. So
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. Like you're right. The concrete blocks, cement houses, clay tile roofs, things like that. Right. I mean, those houses will be around for 500 years. Right. They will
yeah.
be there 500 years from now, which is pretty cool. I mean, so the bones of these places really are well done in most cases, not all cases. But in most cases. So yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with the conversation around a plan B. So a
Yes.
lot of people have talked about a plan B and having a backup. It's a prudent thing to do at
Yeah.
any given point in time. Now it's becoming more and more important, especially if you find yourself in the West, North America, United States, Canada, Europe, and so forth. It's good to have a backup plan to go somewhere that you like spending time at anyway,
Yeah.
and have
Right.
some property and assets outside of where you're living right now, the country that you're living. Can you just share a little bit of that approach and that kind of risk management strategy? Because I think a lot of people think, all right, counterparty risk. My money's in this bank. How risky are the investments that they're in? What are they like? What do the business look like? And or maybe they're looking at an asset class or a niche or an operator or a sponsor in that, or the market or the economy. Not a lot of people think about the political risk, right?
Yeah, the freedom risk. I call it Plan B freedom insurance, right? I mean, it truly is the protection of the most valuable asset we have, which is ourselves, right? I mean, you hate to lose all your stuff, right? But you can go earn it again. You can go make it again, right? You can get it back. But if your freedom is at risk, your liberty, there's nothing you can do about that. And so what we recommend, we've helped about 1,200 people now obtain a Plan B overseas. Many of them in Panama, many of them in Nicaragua, a few of them in Belize as well, over the years. But right, so with the different investments in different countries. But look, I mean, for as little as just under $22,000, I talk round numbers, right? So for $22,000, you can have a residency in Panama with a teak investment. It's about $31,000 in Nicaragua. Belize is a lot more expensive, about $250,000. You can get a residency that actually ultimately leads to citizenship in Belize. And so, depending on what your goals are, if you're just truly looking for a Plan B, whatever. I hope I never need it, but gosh, I'll be glad if I have it. A teak investment in Nicaragua or Panama will deliver that for you. If you're looking for a second citizenship, then Belize might be a place to look at, right? But the idea is that right, you give yourself the ability, because look, there's a fallacy that many U.S. and Canadians and Europeans have as well, and that's if stuff hits the fan, I'm leaving. Well, okay, right. I mean, like you can literally travel with the US passport, Canadian passport, 100 countries around the world. You show up to the immigration desk, they stamp you and say, "Welcome, I just was in Panama. Welcome to Panama, Mr. Cobb. Great, nice to be here." But in 90 days, I have to leave because I have a tourist visa, right? I don't have, I have the right to leave the US anytime I want, but I don't really have the right to stay anywhere else. And so a Plan B, that's what that is, right? It's not that I'm going to leave. No, no, no. It's how do you stay somewhere else? And these countries, many of the countries, not just the three that I mentioned, but many countries have a path to a residency that allows you to be a permanent resident in that country and stay as long as you want. The thing that I like about both Panama and Nicaragua and Belize, but Panama and Nicaragua specifically, is there's no requirement to be there more than one day a year. So it really is like insurance. You make this investment in a teak product, 21,000 or 31,000 in Nicaragua, 22,000 in Panama. You make this investment, you own the teak, you own the land, and then you get a residency card, right? You stick that in your wallet and you hope you never need it, but it's permanent. And you only have to go to these countries one day a year to maintain that permanent residency. So it really is a plan B full out. That's exactly what that is, a plan B.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as the approach to if you have found a place that you like and you like to travel to and
Mhm.
enjoy outside of the country that you're at in a favorable jurisdiction with regards to freedom, right?
Yep.
And just leaving your citizens alone, um, then yeah, I mean, makes perfect sense then to establish some sort of a foothold in that place that you're not
Absolutely.
necessarily thinking, hey, I'm packing up and I'm moving to Mexico, but
Nope.
I love traveling there. I love the people. I love the community that there's in. I'll buy some property there. I'll
Yep.
establish residency and maybe some citizenship in there. And now I have a legal foothold there because legally, and this is what a lot of people found out the hard way, Europeans and North Americans, because they figure, oh, I could just go anywhere at any time because I have a nice passport, right?
Right.
Well, try to do that in 2020 and even some parts of 2021. If you didn't
Right.
have legal means by getting in there or have a legal right to be somewhere, they didn't let you in.
Right.
So
MC, can I
yeah,
thank you for bringing that up, because that's a really important point. A lot of people trust these unofficial programs, right? Like you said, I can go there, I get my tourist visa renewed every 90 days or whatever, right? But those are informal programs, and you're absolutely right. You have to have a formal residency, like you said, in 2020, 2021, right? And then they closed the borders. So a lot of people, actually, I have lots of friends in, Costa Rica and Panama, other places where, like, they closed the immigration offices, they closed the borders. And so now all of a sudden, when their 90-day visa was up in, early 2020 or whatever, like, they became illegal immigrants in a foreign country. I mean, that's a whole nother kind of, like, I don't ever want to do that, right? So these informal programs, they work until they don't work. And I really thank you for putting that on the table, because I think that's another place where people kind of get tripped up or have assumptions like, oh yeah, but no, down the middle, baby, right down the middle. Yeah.
another thing that I would also share, and just to give my listeners and my viewers a global perspective, because we've got a lot of folks in the US and Canada listening to the show. So, and again, it's a mindset thing, which you're huge on too. So, when you're living in those countries, you're like, yeah, they always want Americans or Canadians, and they want us everywhere and travel and they'll never restrict that. We've already cited one example, 2020 and 2021. If you didn't have an actual legal reason to be in a country, they wouldn't let you in. What I can also start to see, and we've already seen this, and I'll give an example of the statement that I'm about to make, is countries are going to start cutting down on opportunities for
Yep.
Americans and Canadians to establish legal means for them to enter countries, such
Yep.
as having a residency or citizenship. And people would say, they'll never do that. What are you talking about? Well, there's already neighborhoods and areas in Mexico that have been overrun, and people are getting kind of the locals are saying, what's going on? We
Right.
like the expats. This is good, but this is basically you're just migrating into our area now and taking over our
Yeah.
communities. Another trend that I would also share is, and this came up in a conversation that I was in a lot of countries around the world, and maybe folks in the US might not be aware of this, they're going to start to require visas from U.S. citizenship, from U.S. citizens. And I'm sure it's going to be the same for Canadians. And I'm sure the Europeans are going to go through the same thing. There's a reason for that. They know that there's a lot of people that are going to look at other options in the
Yep.
coming years, because trends that are in motion stay in motion until those trends die. And the trends with regards to freedom are not good in the West right now.
I mean, the trends for people looking at property and options overseas is skyrocketing, right?
Yeah.
It's a groundswell. Truly, it's a groundswell. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're going to try and contain that.
Yeah. No, and right, and you can't, right? By the way, the other thing that countries are doing is they're starting to raise their prices for things like residencies and citizenships. We're seeing that. In fact, Portugal canceled the most popular way to their golden visa. They eliminated the real estate path. You can still make different investments to do that. But again, countries are curtailing the ways that people can get in or raising the prices. So yeah, it's already happening. You're right on the money there. Yeah.
So let's take a look at a scenario. So somebody's listening to this and they're saying, okay, this makes sense. This is kind of a no-brainer. Let's find some place that I love to go: Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Belize, Mexico, El Salvador, which is very, very popular.
Yep.
It was very interesting how unpopular that was. I don't know, 2 years ago, 18 months ago.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it's the beacon of light, in like just in Latin America. So somebody's listening to this, they go, this makes sense. I'll find some place I love to go. I'll gain a foothold. I'll buy some property. I'll establish some legal residency and maybe some citizenship. Where do they start?
That's a great question. My first advice is go slow. I mean, like you may feel the urgency. I know there's a lot of, especially in the US right now, the polarization, the election's coming up in 6 months, whatever. Like there's this real sense of urgency. But the truth is that the most important thing we can do is go slow. The second most important thing is approach this property purchase, especially. The residency process usually is pretty well laid out and spelled out. It's the property purchase is usually what gives you the qualification for the residency, right? Or the investment. So you make an investment property or something else, and that qualifies you for the residency piece. Generally, that process is pretty well laid out. I recommend people hire an attorney. Yes, you can do it yourself, and God bless you if you want to do it. I would never do it myself. I would hire the expert to go do it, and they will get it done for you. But anyway, go slow, right, is the first thing. But approach this whole process with incredible humility, MC. I think that the bottom line is there's two quotes that I throw around a lot when I'm speaking at conferences, podcasts, right? It's, we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yep.
And we have to forget what we think we know, right? So, these two things together really are, humility or humble approach, because what we need to do is we need to ask a lot of questions, right? And we talked a little bit about this before we got on, live. This idea of buyer beware, seller beware, right? When you're coming out of the US, Europe, Canada, right? There are so many protection agencies in the government. There are regulatory bodies, right? But there are consumer advocacy groups, Ralph Nader, right? I mean, you just think about all these groups and agencies and laws, lemon laws, things like that, right? That are just this bubble of protection. And so it really is seller beware. Look, if you screw the consumer, like a world of crap is going to rain down on you, right? But when you go to the developing world, you move into the world of buyer beware. And the problem for us as consumers in a buyer beware environment is we don't know how to ask the right questions. We don't know how to transact appropriately, and we really don't know how to protect ourselves. And some of these folks down there, we were talking about someone in Mexico. I mean, some of these folks are what I call the jujitsu masters of using your bravado against you, right? They'll bring you in and they'll pump you up, and you're the smartest guy in the whole world. And of course, this is just like, it's so easy, but it's not, and it's very different. And all of a sudden, it's that you're laying on your back and you've lost a bunch of money, right? And they're just laughing all the way to the bank. And you kind of say to yourself, but they can't do that. Why not? There's no seller, there's no buyer protections, right? So a lot of folks get jujitsu'd or judoed when they go overseas, and it's usually like the concept of judo. That's you use somebody's force against them or their momentum against them, right? And bravado is the biggest weakness we have, or overconfidence. I think confidence is important, and we should all have confidence. But I think confidence and humility can live in the same space, right? Overconfidence, bravado, and humility cannot. And so, anyway, caution, patience, slow. and humility. I would say those three are the most important attributes somebody can have when they're going overseas. And then I would just add, we talked about, a professional to help with residency, right? A lawyer, right? I think a residency lawyer, very specifically, right? One that does this for a living. And then the other thing, and many people would never think about doing this, is hire a realtor, right? And not just a real estate agent, but an actual realtor, right? Someone who's licensed in the country and then has what's called an International Realtor Membership, IRN membership with the National Association of Realtors in the United States. Because when you actually have a realtor, there's a code of ethics that they're supposed to go, no, whatever, right? But at least there's a code of ethics that they say they're going to abide by, right? So I think professionals in the legal space, professionals in the real estate space are equally important to the other three. But if you put those 5 things in a basket, you stand a pretty good chance of getting it right the first time.
That's great advice, because you started with a lawyer, which is cardinal, because what a lot of people might or might not be aware of is title to property can change from every single jurisdiction. I mean, countries right next to each other, basically, could have different ones. And when you're talking Latin America, Central America, the Caribbean, I mean, think of all the the different colonizers from different islands and different areas and countries that there have been in the past. They bring their laws and their tradition of laws and rule of law to the lands that they colonized, right? And that's inherent inside of their system. So you really have to understand how it works in each and every jurisdiction that you're operating in, how you hold title to a land, when you cannot directly hold title to a land, which is also the case in some area. Well, maybe you could just talk a little bit about that more.
Yeah, sure. But right. And you actually have, and I was going to just throw that in, but there are constitutional provisions. Like there are things in certain countries' constitution. I'll pick on Mexico for a minute. By the way, it is absolutely true that foreigners cannot own property in Mexico along the oceans. It's actually along the borders, and the ocean is a border, right? The thing I would say about Mexico is, for the last 100 years, they've built this thing called a fideicomiso, which is a bank trust. And so you physically don't own the property. It goes into a bank trust. It's yours for 99 years to use. It's a right of usage, right? And the thing that a lot of places, I would say, don't ever get a property. Like in Panama, they have rights of possession. They call it rights of possession title. In my book, I've got a whole chapter about titles, different types of titles, right? Yeah. But this idea that you've got something called right of possession title, I mean, that's just BS. There is no such thing. Right of possession is not title. It's rights of possession, right? And so, I mean, so you've got these things that aren't title, that people call title, that stupid gringos fall in. Oh, yeah, it's rights of possession title. That's what they told me. Yeah, well, it's not. Anyway, but, Mexico has a legitimate system. The fideicomiso system is a legitimate way for a foreigner to own property. It's a registered bank trust, so it's a legal document, right? There's no gray area there. So I'd be just very confident if I wanted to buy a property in Mexico on the border and I couldn't own it in my own name because I'm a foreigner, it'd be in a fideicomiso. I'm okay with that. On the other hand, Honduras, in their constitution, prohibits ownership of property. I can't remember how big. It's like an acre, maybe it's half a hectare. I don't remember. Anyway, but some very small amount of property. Like, so if I was to do a development in Honduras and I had to go buy, 50 acres, like I can't own it, right? I can't own it. And so what people do is they move into what I call the gray area, right? They start to, we'll set up a Honduran corporation. It's really gray, right? Because it's in contradiction to the constitution of the country, right? So to me, I would, no way, right? So the chapter on title, we do talk about different countries, some examples, but your point about getting a lawyer, look, nobody's going to know the laws of Honduras better than a Honduran lawyer, right? And a lot of the law firms now are international, like Denton. We use Dentons because Dentons has law firms across the region, and so you've got this incredible breadth of experience, and their local office in Honduras, has the entire world corporate Dentons brand standing behind it, and I think that's worth something. You'll pay more You will pay more to have a Denton's legal opinion than you would, the lawyer down the street, right? But I think it's worth it. But then, sorry, MC, one more thing. But there's another example, like when you go to have your immigration document, or you want to do something, right outside the immigration offices in Managua, there are all these lawyers that have these little tiny booths along the side of the road, right? There's nothing. But those are the guys you want to process your immigration paperwork, because they know everyone inside. They're in and out every day, all day, right? So sometimes you want the Dentons, and sometimes you want the immigration lawyer who's on the side of the corner, right outside the immigration office. And so there's sort of this weird dichotomy of, right, which one when, right?
How do you achieve clarity, certainty, and predictability in a world, economy, and markets that are volatile and chaotic? How do you have confidence in an environment where change and disruption is constant? Setting up infinite banking is how you establish certainty in an uncertain world, predictability in an unpredictable world. With an infinite banking policy, you have your capital warehoused outside of the Wall Street casino, where it is guaranteed never to go down in value and guaranteed to grow tax-free. You have guaranteed access to your capital, and you also will be able to access your capital tax-free to use to capitalize on opportunities as you come across them. Creating your own banking system with infinite banking can be your secret weapon to protect and grow wealth during turbulent times. You can watch a presentation and explore infinite banking options for you and your family at yourownbankingsystem.com. That's yourownbankingsystem.com.
Speak to the power of communities, because that's the other thing, right?
Yeah.
If you're planning on spending some time in a foreign country,
Yeah.
and that's your plan B, you want to establish roots there and plug into a community and find people.
Yeah.
No man or woman is an island. We need a community, and there's great expat communities around Latin America and Central America and the Caribbean and so forth. Can you speak a little bit to that and the role that plays in selecting communities and also places to eventually purchase a second place?
Absolutely. Look, this sounds crazy coming from a developer, right? We develop properties, we sell properties. That's our business, right? Selling properties that we develop, right? So what I'm about to say next comes as a shock to a lot of people. I just said it a couple days ago in Panama. As a matter of fact, people are kind of one of these like, what's he saying? Rent for 6 months before you buy. Rent for 6 months before you buy. If you looked at one of our properties, MC, you said, God, I know this place is right for me. That's great. Tell you what, we're gonna put you into a house here for 6 months, rent this guy's house for 6 months. And if at the end of 6 months you still think that way, great. We want you as a neighbor. On the other hand, you might think differently, right? And you say, well, this wasn't for me. Thank goodness you didn't buy there, because now we're stuck with you and you're stuck with us, and who wants that, right? So, so rent before you buy is a big deal, because the other thing that's going to happen is you're going to get to know the people in that community, right? Are they the kind of people that you enjoy spending time with, right? And chances, and I would say that 90% of the time, if somebody commits to rent for 6 months, they got it right? They got it right. 10% of the time, it doesn't work, right? And that's usually culture shock. That has nothing to do with community or anything else. It's just like, oh my God, the developing world. That was not what I thought it was, right? But about 90% of the time, if you rent for 6 months, like people move through and go ahead and transact, right? But it gives you the chance to really get to know the people in the neighborhood, right? And to build that sense of community. Maybe you guys like to golf together, fish together. Maybe you're into service projects and you start working to help some of the local schools with clean water projects or environmental stuff. You're saving the reef in Belize or the jungle in Panama, whatever it is, right? But all of a sudden you can really start to engage with people who share similar desires about what's important in their lives, what they like to do, where they like to spend their time. And when you do that, you create this quality of life that's that's a hallmark of foundational, right? It's truly foundational to the quality of life, and it is community. That's exactly what it is. It's community.
Yeah, and that's also how you become well, you're no longer just an outsider
Right.
vacationing there. You're becoming part of the community, and you're now an insider. You're
Yeah.
inside the circle of trust in that community, right?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed too, and maybe you can comment on that too, a lot of these countries now, if especially if you now are very serious about buying property and you're looking at residency options and then permanent residency options and pathways and eventually citizenship options, it seems that if you're also financially independent, and you generate your own income, especially outside of these countries, and you're coming there, it seems like a lot less resistance from gaining a foothold and getting those permanent residencies and citizenship. Can you comment on that? Because there's a lot of our listeners that are business owners, and there are investors, they are financially independent and have financial freedom. So that
Yep.
also plays a big role and eliminates a lot of roadblocks too. I find it kind of humorous in a lot of these countries that you have to basically prove that you're not coming there and just
Yeah.
taking from their system, but
Right.
you're actually coming in with your own resources and contributing.
It,
But
it,
any comment on that?
Yeah, but it is funny, all right? I mean,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, they want to know that you can support yourself, that you're not going to be a burden to their country, right? And so, right. So, but in a lot of cases, that number is pretty de minimis, right? I mean, a $22,000 investment in Panama, now you're a permanent resident, right? 31,000 in Nicaragua. Belize, again, it's a little bit more, 250, but it gives a path to citizenship, right? But in each of those cases, you're going to be filling out paperwork, or your lawyer will be filling out paperwork for you that basically says, look, here's my income, here's my net worth. I'm not going to be a burden on society, and they want you there because look, truly, in most developing countries, if you move there, you will spend 2, 3, 4, 5 times what the average person spends living there, right? From a GDP standpoint. So you become a perpetual tourist, really. You're going to eat out, you're going to shop, you're going to buy gas, you're going to hire a maid and a gardener, and you're just, right? You're just contributing so much to the economy. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is what you mentioned, because look, people ask me all the time, Mike, you see so many opportunities. I talk about them in conferences, things like that. And I will give your listeners, your viewers, an incredible idea, right? And if I could clone myself, right? If I could clone myself, I would be already doing it. A Dairy Queen franchise in Latin America, in Central America. Nicaragua specifically. People think, oh, you're crazy, Cobb, Nicaragua. They love things American. 500,000 Nicaraguans lived in the U.S., went to elementary school, high school, college in the United States. 500,000. The first person who opens a Dairy Queen in Managua is going to kill it. Okay. So I'm just saying, but so if you have folks on this, on this call, or this podcast, who are entrepreneurial, right? If you can bring your capital to a country, like any of them, right? Doesn't matter if it's Nicaragua, right? There are so many opportunities to serve consumers in ways they're not currently being served. And I'll give you an example. At our Gran Pacifica community, 25%, 24%, so just under a quarter of our property owners are Nicaraguan. Now, we never saw that coming. We just built to North American standards, but there are a whole bunch of Nicaraguans who said, you know what, I'd like all my countertops at the right height. I want the light in the bathroom over the mirror instead of behind me, right? I mean, so all of a sudden, like what you think is a great entrepreneurial idea for North Americans probably is, wouldn't have to be, but assuming that it is, right? But then all of a sudden, a lot of the local folks want to line up and be a part of that too. So yes, entrepreneurial opportunities abound in the region. And MC, I like to call it a time machine, right? It's a time machine. If you look at a place like Cancun, Mexico, that might be, 10 years behind Houston. I don't know, making up a number, or Brownsville, somewhere on, on the coast. Like Cancun's on the coast. So pick a coastal city in Texas, right? Okay. A place like Nicaragua might be 20 years back or 30 years back on the time machine, right? There is no Dairy Queen, right? There's probably a Dairy Queen in Cancun. I don't know if there is or not, but there's every other franchise in the world there, right? So you've got this path of progress that countries and even regions of countries follow as they move through this development curve, right? The path of progress curve. And so depending on what your entrepreneurial desire and skill set is, right, you can kind of dial the lever back and get to a point in time where it's just emerging. And I'll give a great example. In Belize, we have the Best Western franchise on Ambergris Caye, and we're building a Marriott there right now. Okay, we have the third and fourth branded hotel property on Ambergris Caye. There's already an Autograph and a Curio, right? But we have the Best Western up and running. The Marriott's under construction. So if you were a hotel branded kind of entrepreneur, you might say to yourself, you know what? I've built 6 Hyatts in the US over the last 50 years, right? Or 30 years, whatever. I'm going to go build a Hyatt in Belize. You know what? Dial the dial back. This is the time to do it. Somebody will do it.
Yeah.
Why not somebody listening today, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Doug Casey talks about an unlevel playing field, and that's why he loved traveling and going to different countries. Because especially if you come from the West, like you said, it's like you just climbed into a time machine, and you're like,
right.
"Oh, they don't have this yet." You know,
you've seen the future, you've lived the future.
Yep. And there's so many, even when I travel back to South Africa from time to time, I go there and the thoughts are like, oh, they should have X, Y, and Z. They don't have it here yet.
Mm-hmm.
There's an opportunity there. So
bingo.
I know we've got a lot of smart business owners and entrepreneurs listening to this and investors. So there's opportunities like you wouldn't believe it in the developing world. Here is another question that folks might have too. And I'll just make a comment on this question because this is like and I know you covered this in your book too. So medical care. And I just want to, again, give a global perspective to my American audience and Canadian audience and folks in the West that there are incredible medical centers, doctors, surgeons.
Yep.
In these places. I mean, I can tell you that there are private hospitals in South Africa, for example, where you would get some of the best medical care in the world.
Absolutely.
Same thing in all of these countries. So how does that work? And just a comment on the other question might be, are there hospital plans, insurance, because that's kind of a mindset thing, or is a lot of the stuff easily just paid out of pocket?
Yeah. Well, I have a whole chapter in the book about this because it deserves at least, actually, you could probably write a whole book about this one thing, right? No, I mean, but yeah, so here's my recommendation. If you're a US, Canadian, European expat, get what they call the expat insurance, right? Something like a company called Bupa has it. There's some other big companies out there. And basically what it is it's sort of enhanced evacuation insurance, right? So we had it, right? So if I got hit by a bus, I could get stabilized in Nicaragua, then they'd fly me on an air ambulance to Miami or Houston and take care of me in the US, right? It's very, very affordable. We did a super high deductible. I think we did a $25,000 deductible. So my premium was really low, right? I wanted true insurance. I get hit by a bus. I'm going to be in the hospital for 3 months. It's $6 million. I don't want to pay that, right? But the cost of medical care is so inexpensive. And you used the right word a second ago, MC. You said the medical care in South Africa, right? We found living in Nicaragua, the care that our service providers gave. Our doctors gave us their cell phone numbers. Like, they would call to check on us at home, right? I felt I hit my head once in a hotel. I was just on a business trip down there and the doctor came to the hotel, right? My staff said, hey, go see Mike over at the Barcelo. So, right. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you get, but they really care about you and you can just pay out of pocket. It's silly inexpensive to pay out of pocket. So we had what I would call the catastrophic insurance in case you get hit by a bus, right? But then everything else we just paid out of pocket. But a lot of these hospitals actually have their own programs and you pay like $50 a month or $100 a month and you get like half off of everything and so different strokes for different folks, right? But there's a real broad range. But the key thing, and you said it, the medical care in these countries really is phenomenal. you just have to see it to believe it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, to bring up our friend Doug Casey again, he had
Yep.
surgery done on his foot in Mexico, I believe, that he shared, and he said it was one of his best experiences, medical experiences.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. So
Right.
I think that definitely is a big question. So I'm glad you
Yeah.
covered that in the book too. So and then as a developer too, this has been interesting to see your business model. You're in different places too. You guys have different types of projects,
Yep.
from larger properties to tiny home communities too,
Yep.
right? There's some
Yeah.
of those. And then
Yeah.
there's also with your obviously your mortgage and your banking background, financing options, which
Yes.
doesn't really exist in in
Yeah.
developing worlds. That's why they don't have crazy real estate bubbles.
Eh,
Side note, but
good
yeah,
point. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And the thing that sometimes people think, oh, well, Cobb will only finance his projects. That's not true. Our bank is an independent bank. It finances. I'm gonna make up a number. 15-20% of our loans at the bank actually go to our ECI's clients. Right. We never. By the way, our bank never funds developers. It only funds an end user consumer, and it only lends 50%. So let's say that you come down to pick a country where you won't work in, Mexico. You come down to Mexico, you want to buy a condo in Cancun, it's $500,000. Yeah, if you put up 250, the bank will put up 250, right? And so about 80% of the bank's loans are to projects that are not ours. So yeah, we act as an incredible financing organization throughout Central and South America for anybody looking for property. And obviously as a developer, I like it because when our property and residency consultants are talking to a client, say, yeah, well, you want to finance, we can help you. And it's just right off the top. But the bank works, with many developers and many realtors in the region to help facilitate transactions.
What's the if you compare it to rates in the US? Because I know the cost of capital, for example, I talk to the guys in the Cayman Islands all the time, is slightly higher than in the United States. What
Yeah.
how do those mortgage rates compare? And are they US dollar based, or are they in the currency of the country of the property that you're buying this property?
Sure. So, because I'm in the United States and the U.S. has very strong banking laws, I'm not allowed to talk about interest rates, and so I'm not.
Okay.
Um, I would say they're higher. They're higher than the U.S. I think that's just a general statement. There's nothing specific in that. Um,
Right.
the really cool thing, though, is that the key bank actually can make loans in euros, Canadian dollars, U.S. dollars, pounds, francs. I'm missing a currency anyway, but like 5-6 currencies, because we actually do hold those currencies. We transact in those currencies, so we have loans in foreign dollars. So if you had a European that was buying a property in Mexico, well, they earn euros, right? I mean, that's what they earn at home, so they
Right.
can have a loan based in euros, right? So there's never a currency risk or a currency fluctuation risk to them as a borrower. So anyway, so yeah, so it's actually pretty cool that we're able to do that with folks.
And also, cryptocurrency is available for payments too on some of the projects,
We,
right?
we do. We accept
Yeah.
crypto. We have a Coinbase wallet, so I think there's 6-8 cryptos that will take Bitcoin. Most people just whatever they have, they'll move it into Bitcoin or USDC, send it over to us. But yeah, we take crypto. We've taken metals. Like somebody says, oh, I got $50,000 worth of gold. And be like, no problem. We'll take gold. And so again, one hard asset for another. We're very practical in that matter. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. So, could you just name the countries that you have developments in that ECI is doing all this in?
Sure. So we're in Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama. We own the assets in those 4 countries. We have joint venture projects in Honduras and El Salvador. And then we actually, believe it or not, we own a small bed and breakfast in the Azores in Portugal. We picked that up because we were tracking along that golden visa, and then the
Yeah.
law changed. So I don't know what we may keep it. We may divest of it. I don't know yet. But right now we're in, 5 countries, but really projects, mostly in Central America. Yeah.
Any potential future projects in Mexico? I know the last time we spoke about Bob, the different projects you had mentioned that as a potential future, interest
Yeah.
establishing a project there.
It is. I'm still very interested in doing a project in Mexico. I think it'll be in maybe a high desert somewhere, because that's a very different geography from what we have now. I think that high, dry kind of, whatever, somewhat seasonal, but kind of, never cold, never super hot, but dry climate's a very popular climate, and I think that we'll probably do that in Mexico at some point. So yeah, I think Mexico's on the horizon. I also think Medellin, Colombia is on the horizon, and Ecuador, somewhere there. But you mentioned Doug Casey a couple of times. I went down and saw the estancias while they were under construction in Cafayate. I mean, he built a world-class, wonderful community. Now, it's high end. I mean, it's very, very high end, and $500,000 and $750,000 and up, right? But that's a different market segment. We really work. We have properties that start about 150 and go to maybe 400, 500. That's sort of our, that's our market, right? I would call solid middle class, right?
Yeah.
But Argentina, with the vineyard concepts, are definitely something that we're going to revisit. Probably a little further south. We'll probably be in the Mendoza region if we do something in Argentina. So yeah.
Some great Malbec from that region in Mendoza. Yeah. So this has been fantastic, Michael. Really appreciate the insights and your knowledge just on this. This is incredibly valuable for my listeners and my viewers. Where can they grab a copy of the book?
The book is actually in pre-release right now. It's pre-order only, so I don't actually have a physical copy, but there it is. How to buy your home overseas and get it right the first time. But if you just go to Amazon and type in Michael K. Cobb, because there's lots of Michael Cobbs out there, but Michael K. Cobb, this book comes up, and you can pre-order a copy by Kindle right now for $2.99. I mean, like that, it's a no-brainer. I hope that anybody thinking about property overseas or a plan B really will invest $3. Actually, that you mentioned at the very beginning, the $3, who cares? Invest the 3 hours to read this book, or read parts of it. You don't have to read the whole thing, right? But there are certain chapters, the title chapter, oh my goodness, right? Like the first 4 chapters really teach us how to think differently. When we move from a seller, beware, to a buyer beware environment. How do we change how we think? The first 4 chapters do that. And then there's a chapter on title, a chapter on healthcare, and some other things that you might want. But if you invested, the 2 to 3 hours, that would be the best investment you would ever make if you're thinking about a property overseas or a plan B. So I hope that many folks will make that investment. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show and sharing your insights and your knowledge around this very important topic. And thank you to my listeners and my viewers again for spending your most valuable resource, your time, with me on the show. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com. Podcasts, books, reports, webinars, and much, much more. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, The Wealth Dojo, the #1 newsletter in the alternative wealth strategy and alternative asset investing space. You can subscribe to the weekly newsletter at cashflowninja.com/subscribe. Until next time, live infinitely.
This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.